So I'm a little bit late to the SSD party, but I'm finally happy that I have arrived. So today's video is going to be like a story tutorial, and they're going to be like timestamps indicating where everything is so that you can easily skip to the point that it's kind of important to you, or the point that you find interesting. So a couple of years back, when I was getting my laptop, I had two options when it came to the kind of storage I wanted on the computer. It was either one, I go with a 256 GB SSD, or two, I go with a 1 TB hard drive disk. At that particular point in time, what I needed most was the storage. So I chose to go with a 1 TB HDD hard drive disk. But the good thing was that there was an extra empty slot for the solid state drive. So I was like, in future, when, I have extra moolah, I could always upgrade to a solid state drive. Fast forward to late last year, a friend of mine asks me, "Yo, Tony, I need you to help me get a new laptop, right?" And, I ask her for specifications. Then she tells me, everything that she needs. And I go to Google and look around and get her get her the computer that she needed. And one of the things that I was actually looking for was, I said, we are moving into the future, so let's get her a computer with an SSD. And also because she wanted one of those slim computers. So, and slim technology these days is definitely going to be an SSD. I set it up for her, give it to her, and then I think nothing of it. A couple of weeks later, I am in need of a computer to do some work, and I didn't have mine at hand. So I'm like, "Yo, can I borrow your computer?" And she lends me her computer. And then I turn on the computer. Okay, my process of starting to work is this. When I'm booting up my computer, I should turn it on, go make a cup of tea, then come back and start working. That's because my hard drive disk is 5,400 RPM. 5,400 RPM is the worst speed you can ever get. Unfortunately, when I was looking for hard drive, I didn't have an option for 7,200. So I just chose to go with that. So here I am. I have this computer that I'm borrowing, and I'm booting it up. Just before I go to make my cup of tea, the thing was already booted up. And I'm like, all right. My first thought was like, okay, this is kind of cool. This is really, really interesting. And I'm like, oh, so this is kind of like the power of SSD. But I was also kind of a little bit skeptical, saying it's because the computer is still new, not loaded up with a lot of programs. So the thing that I think that really, really got me interested and really said that I really need to start looking for an SSD was when I shut down the computer. You often read about how awesome SSDs are. You're like, oh my god, loads the OS very fast, loads program very quickly, boots and shuts down very quickly. I think the first time I shut down that computer, I think when I was using it in that session, I was like, did this thing shut down? Or did it go to sleep? And that was the first time. I had never seen a computer shut down that fast. So I decided that at that point was when I was going to get an SSD. So the reason why I decided that I needed to get an SSD was because of that shutdown. Literally just the way it shut down so quickly. That was the reason why I started doing the research to get an SSD. I had a bunch of them in my Amazon wish list. But the reason why I finally decided to buy, whereby I was like, I'm taking money from my pocket and buying this SSD, it's a funny one. So there was a time when, a couple of weeks back, when a friend of mine they were having a microcontroller class, and they needed to borrow my computer to do some projection work, because my computer had a HDMI port, and the ones that they had did not have any. And so they were like, "Yo, can we borrow your laptop?" So I give him my laptop, and then I go out to do something. So when I come back, they're already there with the instructor. And I'm asking, "So why have you guys not started yet?" They're like, "Oh no, we had to reboot the computer, and because something was not working." And I was like, "Wait, you guys reboot the computer?" Let me tell you something about a 5,400 RPM computer. Like I told you, I make tea before I start working. So I knew this was 10 minutes 10 minutes of life that was just going to be gone like that. And I was like, oh my God, why did you restart the computer? Because, it's one of those things whereby sometimes when you're in a less than stellar relationship, let's just call it that, you kind of like adjust yourself to inefficiencies. You're like, yeah, whatever. I don't have any other option. And you kind of adjust yourself to the inefficiencies. But when you're looking at something not working and you're seeing someone else experiencing it and it's not a good experience, it's when it becomes magnified in a way that it is just not a good feeling. So it's like just 10 minutes going by. And every single minute of those 10 minutes, this instructor dude was like, yo, dude, your computer is so effing slow. Like, we're gonna pray for your computer. And I was just like, oh man, this is so freaking bad. And it was like, just there, like, deriding my computer, like, really deriding my computer. And I was just like, feeling silly. So I was like, yo, dude, look, my computer is really slow, but when it comes to performance, once the program is booted, it's really good. Like, I was like, yeah, right. And I think at that point is when I decided, and I was just like, you know what? I was like, you think my computer weak? Now I'll show you the true power of my computer. And literally that evening, I went home and I said, we're buying this SSD today because we live in the moment. Went on to Amazon and placed my order for that effing SSD. And I was like, this slow life, we're not living it anymore. When it comes to selection of an SSD, there is a varied number of form factors to choose from. There is the 2.5 inch, there is the M-SATA, there is the M.2 and the PCIe. For the sake of this crash course, I'm going to talk about the two form factors that are typically common when it comes to laptop computers. That is the 2.5 inch and the M.2. For the 2.5 inch, this is the typical form factor that is already in a lot of 2.5 inch laptop hard drive disks. So it's kind of like an easy upgrade if you're coming from maybe like a relatively older computer that doesn't have M.2 connections and you want to give you want to bring to improve your performance with an SSD drive. So you just plug in to your motherboard where the HDD used to be, but you probably want to make sure that at least your motherboard supports the SATA drive, the serial ATA drive. The other option is the M.2 SSD. So this is like the newer form factor for SSDs. For the M.2 SSD, there are two types of connectors as illustrated here. There's one with one single groove, and which has like this is called an M key. And the M key has 5 pins, and then there's this one with 2 grooves, and it has what is known as a B key, which has six pins wide, and an M key, the 5 pin wide. For this kind of SSD with the 2 grooves, this one over here, it's typically the kind of bus that it uses is serial ATA bus, and that's how you identify. So if you see an M.2 SSD with 2 grooves, that's a serial ATA SATA. Let's just call it SATA. It's a SATA drive. The other option is this one with one single groove. That is the NVMe PCIe SSD. So it has one single groove. So when you're choosing an M.2 SSD, you have to make sure you look at your motherboard and you know which of these two connectors does it have. You really would not want to buy an M.2 SATA drive when the connector on your motherboard is actually an NVMe PCIe. So you better be careful and check on that. The other thing about the M.2 is the length. We can talk a little bit about the width. The width for M.2 drives can range from 12 to 16 to 22 millimeters to 30 millimeters. But when it comes to laptops, the 22 millimeters is the one which kind of prevails more often than not. And in terms of length, there is 30, there is 42, there is 60, 80, and 110 millimeters. So 42 millimeter M.2 drive would be something like this. A 60 millimeter long one is and a sample is like this one, and the one which is by far the most popular form factor is the 2280, the 80 millimeter long, 22 millimeter wide, 80 millimeter long SSD. So this 2280 is the one which will be the most prevalent, but you still also have to look at your motherboard and know which one is supported. So just things to note is what kind of connector does your motherboard support and what kind of lengths are available. For me, for my upgrade, I went with this because my motherboard supported the NVMe PCIe, had the NVMe PCIe connector, so it supported that kind of bus, and I also chose to go with the 2280 because it was also supported, and the reason I chose the Samsung 970 Evo was mostly because it says Amazon choice, and I definitely one of these people who are suckered by this branding. And I was also like, I trust Amazon. I don't think they would recommend crap, but if it ended up not being a good recommendation, I just be like, yo, what the flux, Amazon? Why are you recommending crap? Yeah, so this is the one that I got, and I'll be installing in my computer. So looking at the internals of this computer, we see this is where the M.2 2280 SSD is supposed to slide in and fit. And this is the 2.5-inch hard drive disk. So like I said, if you want to replace, you can replace, both of these can hold that two different kinds of SSDs that can fit here. You can fit an M.2 here, or you can fit a 2.5-inch SATA SSD over here. So one thing that you would want to keep in mind when you're getting an SSD, at least at M.2, you have to make sure you have this screw. It's an M.2 screw. So when you're buying, you either have to look and see whether your motherboard provides it. Mine came already with it, or if it doesn't have it, you'd have to buy it. The other thing, talking about M.2 form factors, you see that these slots here, so it doesn't mean that you only have to fit a 22 by 80. So using this crude way of measuring, you can see you can either have a 2280 M.2 SSD, a 2260 M.2 SSD, or a 2240 M.2 SSD. So that's for you to decide which one you want to go with. For me, I chose to go with this one is an M.2 2280. So that's where it fits in. So basically, to get it fitting, you just unscrew this. And when it comes to installing it, the way they instructed is you put it in at an angle, then take it down, then slide it in, and then you just screw it in. So when you boot into Windows after installing your SSD, you would want to head over to disk management and initialize your disk. When you're initializing your disk, you'll have an option of what partition style to use. There's the master boot record and the GPU ID partition table. The best option would probably be GPT, the GU ID partition table, if you have that. But the thing I think about the GU ID is you have to make sure that you have the UEFI BIOS. So you'd have to check and confirm that. But it's a newer format, but it's the best format to go with. So once you have that and you've initialized your drive, then you're ready to continue with the setup. Samsung offers a couple of software off of their website to aid in the management of your SSD. There is Samsung Magician that is designed to help manage your SSD by providing firmware update notifications, performance benchmarks, and there's even a rapid mode feature, among others. There is the Samsung Data Migration software that is used to migrate all of your data, such as your OS, your applications, and your user data from your hard drive disks to your new Samsung SSD. Thing to note is that this only works for a select number of Samsung SSDs. So if you don't have a Samsung branded SSD, you may have to look for other ways to clone your hard drive disk. And finally, there is the Samsung NVMe driver that could be installed to ensure smooth operation of your NVMe SSD. You may run into the issue where the files to be cloned are far larger than the space that is actually available on the SSD. So you'll have to reduce the file size by either deleting files and uninstalling programs or moving the files to an external storage. A tool that can help with this is a hard drive disk space analyzer such as Wiztree. What Wiztree does is it will scan your drive and give you a breakdown of which folders are occupying the most space so that you know what to move or what to remove for the greatest impact when it comes to reducing space. Samsung does offer a data migration tool for cloning your hard drive disk onto your SSD, but as mentioned, the caveat is that it only works for a select number of Samsung SSDs. If you do not have a supported Samsung SSD, you could opt for Macrium Reflect. The procedure for cloning is pretty straightforward. You have to ensure though that the data being cloned from the hard drive can fit in the SSD. After cloning is done, it's time to get into the end game of activating your SSD for use. First, head over to Disk Management and make sure your SSD is online. Turn off your computer. Disconnect your hard drive disk. Boot into Windows off of your SSD. And check if your SSD has been assigned the C drive letter. Turn off your computer. Reconnect your hard drive disk. Boot into BIOS. Change the boot order so your SSD's priority is higher than the hard drives. Boot into Windows and enjoy the new experience. Once you confirm that everything is running okay, you may then choose to format your hard drive and start using it as your data drive. So this has been Okello. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you on the next video. Cheers.